Hello and welcome to the KPI Institute's webinar, How to Conduct a Strategic Planning Maturity Assessment. My name is Andrei Kostia and I will be your host for today along with our presenter Alin Shonda. This webinar is part of a series of free educational materials that aim to enhance the knowledge and know-how of those interested, while also creating a bridge between us as a company and you, our public. The KPI Institute is a research organization specialized in business performance. It operates research programs in 12 practice domains, each linked to a certification course, ranging from strategy and KPIs to employee performance, and from customer service to innovation performance. The KPI Institute continuously builds on its values of best know-how, data and facts, and common sense to achieve its mission of integrating performance as a discipline through research, publications, and, what interests us today, through educational programs such as this webinar. Today, 13 years after the KPI Institute was created, we can proudly say that our products have reached professionals in 5 continents and that our public comprises a worldwide community of 73,000 members online and 28,000 registered companies on smartkpis.com. Today's webinar will highlight the best ways to conduct a strategic planning maturity assessment, and it will be delivered by Alin Shonda, the head of customer relationship the head of performance audit services at the KPI Institute, with over 10 years of experience in the banking sector. For more than 3 years, he was an internal auditor, gaining an analytical perspective on operations and valuable insight on risk assessment and auditing methods and procedures. As an auditor, he holds valuable experience regarding the design and implementation of internal processes which serve to properly identify and assess risk and compliance with regulations and reporting requirements. This presentation lasts between 30 to 45 minutes. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have during the webinar, as they will be answered at the end of the presentation in our Q&A session. Enjoy the KPI Institute's webinar, How to Conduct a Strategic Planning Maturity Assessment. Now I would like to invite Alin to begin his presentation.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining in. In today's webinar, we're going to talk about how to conduct a strategic planning maturity assessment, starting with the benefits of such an assessment, moving on to the key knowledge areas, which are part of our methodology and how we conduct such assessments. We're going to discuss a little bit about maturity models, how they're built, what's their purpose, and we're going to look into the assessment process with relevant examples on the strategic planning maturity assessment. Further on, I'm going to show you some outputs that we deliver to client organizations following this assessment, and we're going to have a Q&A session at the end to answer any of your questions on the topic. Thanks. I would like to also thank my colleague for his introduction, and thank you all again for attending. Now, considering today's webinar, here are some learning objectives. First of all, you will acknowledge the importance of such an assessment in supporting the competitive advantage of an organization. You already know how important strategic planning is in a continuously changing environment. Now, you will understand the impact of conducting such an assessment and get familiar with the main tools used for assessing the maturity of the strategic planning capability. Also, you will get valuable insights on the assessment process, as I told you, relevant examples on how we do it, and the use of the outputs that we deliver. Let's start with the benefits. First benefit, the maturity assessment is designed to ensure that you have the right tools, processes, and people in the right place. Further on, this maturity assessment shows you the current maturity level on a 5-level scale, I'll show you further on, and teaches you how to progress from one maturity level to the next one. By comparing current practices to best practices regarding strategic planning, you'll add value to this process within your organization. It also supports implementing initiatives, because one of the outputs is a roadmap for improvement report together with a roadmap for improvement infographic that can be used during monthly performance review meetings. It will educate stakeholders to be oriented towards continuous learning and improving, and will also justify investments that you've made in the past for improving the strategic planning process. Now, let's look into the key knowledge area. This is a thorough assessment meant to provide reasonable assurance that everything is done right and the results are the ones expected. Now, this is our strategic planning maturity model framework. It contains 6 dimensions, basically 6 perspectives that we look into. The first one being strategy envisioning, then strategy formulation, strategy focus, strategy articulation, strategy review, and strategy governance and communication. Now, to give you a little bit of insight, in strategy envisioning, we look at the corporate identity elements like vision, mission, values, how they relate to the entity's purpose, and how they provide a sense of direction towards the desired state of evolution. We evaluate whether they were formulated in a simple but comprehensive language and whether they are embedded in the employee's behavior. Now, in strategy formulation, we look into how the strategic process takes place, which stakeholders are engaged, and what instruments are used to perform the external environmental scan and define the current state of the entity. With strategy focus, we provide an overview on the practices used to convert strategy into simple, actionable objectives, because this is one of the points. We want strategy to be reflected in objectives that have KPIs assigned to track the achievement of those objectives and to connect plans with actions. In strategy articulation, we assess whether the strategy is aligned and integrated across all levels and functions of the entity. We look at the tools and instruments used in the implementation process. With strategy review, we present the ability of the identity to adapt to changes and keep an updated strategy through a thorough review process that involves the right stakeholders. And with the last dimension, strategy governance and communication, we look into the efficiency of the strategy communication process, the level of awareness, transparency, and understanding in regards to the roles and responsibilities for cascading and aligning the strategy across the organization. Now, let's start with a poll. I want to get your feedback on the following statement. My organization is effective at strategy formulation. You have 5 answers, potential answers. First one being strongly agree, second agree, neither agree nor disagree, the fourth disagree, and the fifth strongly disagree. Now, please take 1 minute to answer this poll and collect your feedback. Okay, I think everyone got a chance to answer the poll. I will ask my colleagues to display the results. Okay, it's a tie. So half of you strongly believe that the organization is effective at strategy formulation, and half of you agree with the same fact. Now, there's a reason why I'm asking. Mainly, this is a statement or a question, if you wish, part of one of our research studies, the State of Strategy Management and Key Performance Indicators report. And these are the results that we obtained back then when we did the research report. As you can see, almost half, 49.5 out of the respondents said that they agree to the statement and that their organization is effective at strategy formulation. But you can see that a significant percentage neither agree nor disagree, 16.4%, 13.4% disagree with the statement, and we have almost 3% out of the respondents that said they strongly disagree with the statement the organization is effective at strategy formulation. Now, this wasn't the only statement that we included in that research report. We also asked whether the organization is also effective at strategy execution, because this is very important. Okay, we formulate strategy, we have a clear strategic plan, but we need to monitor the execution of that strategy and make sure that we achieve our goals. Now, among the respondents, again, 39.4% said that they agree and that their organization is effective at strategy execution. But again, significant percentages of respondents said they neither agree nor disagree, or they disagree, and finally, they strongly disagree. Now, another statement, including the research report, is it is understood by the senior management team that managing strategy is primarily about managing change. Now think a little bit about what I said before about strategy review. And again, we have the highest percentage, 43.8% of the respondents said that they agree with the statement that the senior management team really understand that strategy, managing strategy is primarily about managing change. But again, significant percentage of respondents said they neither agree nor disagree, or they disagree and strongly disagree. Now, this confirms to us that strategic planning is very important for an organization, since such a high number of respondents agreed with the fact that strategy formulation, execution is important, and again, the fact that managing strategy is primarily about managing change. Now, another statement in the research report regards monitoring the external environment to identify threats and opportunities. And if you look closely, the results are quite similar. Most of the participants said they agree, but still significant percentages of respondents neither agree nor disagree and disagree. This shows us that there's still a lot of work to do, and this is one of the reasons why we started to conduct such maturity assessments on the strategic planning capability. Seeing the use of having a clear picture on the process, tools, everybody, the people involved, and providing client organizations with a roadmap for improvement to reach a higher level to increase the maturity of this capability. Okay, let's discuss a little bit about maturity models. First of all, these are tools used to assess the complexity of a certain organizational capability or system. In this case, we're talking about the strategic planning capability. Now, our integrated performance maturity model includes more than just the strategic planning capability. We also look into the performance measurement, the performance management, even the performance culture and employee performance management. But today's webinar is focused on the strategic planning maturity assessment. Now, usually, when we talk about maturity models, the complexity is reflected on a 5-level scale. And this is the same as our methodology. You can see here, level 1 is initial, level 2 is emergent, level 3 structured, level 4 integrated, and level 5 optimized. Now, there is clear criteria that defines each maturity level, and this criteria comes out of more than 10 years of research conducted by the KPI Institute on performance management practices, and it also comes from our practical experience in working with organizations in whether implementing performance management systems or improving current performance management frameworks. The last and final characteristic that you should know about is that progression from one maturity level to another becomes more difficult as maturity increases. Now, in other words, it's easier to get from level 1 to level 2. You can make some really simple and clear improvements to the framework in order to get from level 1 to level 2. When it comes to getting from level 4 to level 5, it's a bit different story. Things get more complex, and the awareness and transparency need to increase. Okay, let's go into the fun part and see some assessment examples. And talk about, sorry, about the assessment process. Now, first of all, as a process, we have an evidence-based assessment, and that means looking into relevant internal documents to see for characteristics and current practices. Now, for this, we look, I'll give you some examples. We look at the strategic plan, we look at corporate scorecards, we look at departmental scorecards, we look at even at job descriptions to see roles and responsibilities. Now, the evidence-based assessment has best practices as a core component. So we have 25 statements that reflect best practices that need to be scored by the assessor on a scale from 1 to 5, and this based on clear assessment criteria. The second stage of the maturity assessment is a perception-based assessment, and this implies a survey that is sent out to key stakeholders for them to respond. Now, also formulated as statements, the best practices need to be rated by the internal key stakeholders on a scale from 1 to 5, and this based on the extent to which the statements apply for their organization. Now, further on, I'm going to give you some examples so you better understand how this is done. The third stage and final stage of the maturity assessment is having some interviews, mostly individual interviews with selected key stakeholders. And this is meant to ensure consistency in results, clear out some missing information or some information that was not clear in the evidence-based assessment and the relevant internal documents that were provided by the client organization, but also looking at high variances between answers to the survey, okay? Because people see things differently depending on where they stand, whether they are a member of top management or front-end employees. What's important for you to acknowledge and to remember is that the assessment process is supported by the GPA unit platform. This is very important because we have a dedicated online platform that supports all three stages. All the assessment criteria and the best practices are captured in the online platform. The platform has its own features to deploy the survey. You don't need to work with SurveyMonkey or other providers for deploying a survey, and it also facilitates the interview-based assessment by collecting the contact details of those who fill in the survey. And I'm talking about an email address and a phone number for each internal key stakeholders that completes the survey. As a scoring methodology, and this is how we do it, we see the perception-based assessment weighing, the evidence-based assessment, sorry, weighing 75% in the final score, and the perception-based assessment weighing 25%. Now, perception is important, how people see things done within the organization, but facts are more important. So this is why we have this weight. Now, considering the final score, we can determine the current maturity level. For example, if the final score is between 1 and 1.5, then the maturity level will be initial. If the final score is between 2.71 and 3.7, the current maturity level is structured. Again, these are the 6 dimensions that are part of the strategic planning maturity model framework: strategy envisioning, formulation, focus, articulation, review, and finally governance and communication. And we're going to take them one by one, and I'm going to give you some relevant examples of statements that reflect best practices and also assessment criteria. Now, first of all, we talk about strategy envisioning. So strategy envisioning is about the corporate identity elements. We're talking about vision, mission, and values. First of all, the vision needs to reflect what does the organization aim to achieve. Second, the mission should say why does the organization exist, while the values need to reflect beliefs, commitments, and the expectations of shareholders from employees and also from customers. Now, for strategy envisioning, I'm going to give you an example for the evidence-based assessment. One of the statements that reflect best practices says, the mission reflects why the organization exists and its purpose. Now, as assessment criteria for this statement, you will need to figure out whether the mission is concise, clear, describes contribution, identifies key stakeholders, and supports distinction. Now, this isn't the only statement. It's one example. Another example from strategy envisioning is having the mission well formulated and providing explicit guidance on what the organization aims to achieve, or having the value statements being meaningful, reflecting beliefs, commitments, and expectation. But we can also talk about perception. So for this, I'm going to give you another example. But first, this is a screenshot from the online platform that I've mentioned before. You can see here the statement that I just gave you as an example. The mission reflects why the organization exists and its purpose. And you can see how the assessment criteria is captured in the online platform. Now you have clear guidance here on how to rate the statement, getting to the score for the evidence-based assessment, eventually the final score, and determining the maturity level. Furthermore, you can see that you have dedicated fields in the online platform to write down observations and references to the documents that provided you the information needed to rate these statements. All this information, the score you gave, the observation, the references to documents are all exported in a centralized Excel file, making it real easy for you. It has the average scores already calculated to determine the score for the evidence-based assessment, the final score, and the maturity level. Let's see an example from the perception-based assessment on strategy envisioning. The mission statement provides both frontline employees and the management a strong sense of direction and priorities. This is one of the statements that internal key stakeholders need to rate on a scale from 1 to 5 based on the extent to which they consider that this statement applies for their organization. Again, this is not the only statement. We have other statements here regarding the mission, the vision, whether it's inspirational and motivating enough as to push everyone moving forward. We're looking to see whether the values provide clear and relevant guiding behavior principles for employees, and if they drive employee behavior, whether they are strongly embedded in the organization culture. The online platform, again, as I told you, supports the process. You can deploy the survey containing all the statements for the perception-based assessment, and you can centralize, export all questions answered. You have a screenshot here from the online platform. This is an example. And you can see on the line with user results list, you have two buttons: export users. This contains the name of the users and their contact details, and another option to export all questions answers. Okay, let's move on to the next dimension and see how we assess strategy formulation. Here's an example from the evidence-based assessment. A statement saying the strategy formulation process is well articulated and thoroughly documented. This is very important. Now, as assessment criteria, the strategy formulation process should be captured in a process map, should be supported by external environmental scans, should be supported by an internal analysis, usually a SWOT analysis, and should be supported by insights collecting from both internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. Again, this is not the only statement in the evidence-based assessment for strategy formulation. We look into more facts, like having the strategic plan supported by a set of strategic objectives structured on multiple layers and perspectives, having an instrument like a strategy map with a comprehensive display of the organizational strategy. Now, let's move on and see, again, this is a screenshot from the online platform containing the statement and the relevant assessment criteria, just for as an example for you to see how the methodology is captured in the online platform. Let's see a statement from the perception-based assessment. Relevant external stakeholders are engaged during strategy formulation by collecting their inputs. This is part of the survey. This is a statement that needs to be answered by internal key stakeholders. I want to give you some other examples here from strategy perception, from perception-based assessment. All relevant internal key stakeholders across different hierarchical levels are engaged during the strategy formulation process. Or the organization's strategic plan is connected to and reflects the medium and long-term strategic objectives of the organization. Again, a screenshot from our online platform showing you how you can collect the answers in a very easy way and how you can get insights from those results. Let's move on now to strategy focus. I'll give you an example here. For the evidence-based assessment, the strategy map provides a comprehensive display of the organizational strategy. Now, having a strategy map is not enough. The strategy map should meet the following criteria: having strategy layers, pillars, directions, themes, or perspectives. Think about the balanced scorecard and the 4 perspectives of the balanced scorecard. Having objectives displayed in the strategy map with correlations between them. This is cause and effect relationships. And again, having the strategy map as a one-page document, being easy to be read and understood. For the perception-based assessment on strategy focus, I'll give an example. Objectives indicate specifically what the entity wants to achieve. This is very important, and this is a question that we ask internal key stakeholders for them to express their perceptions. Now, we also have other statements here, like the objectives being grouped in relevant visual representation structured. Again, a criteria that you saw in the evidence-based assessment, having cause and effect relationships between the objectives established in a logical and clear way. Okay, the next dimension is strategy articulation. An example here of a statement that is scored by the assessor by looking at relevant internal documents is: objectives are cascaded to departmental level. Okay, this is again important, and you have some assessment criteria here. Depending on the size of the organization, you whether take a sample out of the total number of departments, whether it's not that big, the organization is not that big, you look into all departments. Now, the assessment method looks into the percentage of departments that have objectives cascaded. Okay, so for score 1, you have less than 30% of departments. For score 2, between 30 and 55, and so on. As a process, when we talk about the evidence-based assessment for this dimension, we don't only look at objectives. We also look at scorecards being cascaded, dashboards, the same portfolio of initiatives, using the same assessment method on the percentage of the elements from our sample that meet the criteria. The perception-based assessment, I'll give you an example here. There is a strong perception of strategy clarity through cascading across the entire organization. This is a question designed for internal key stakeholders through which they express their opinion. Okay, the next one would be strategy review. I'll give you an example here. The strategy review process is well articulated, and the assessment criteria is having a formal strategy review process that takes place at least on an annual basis. The process starts in preparation of the organizational budget. Any changes incurred by the strategy review are officially communicated to key internal stakeholders. And the last assessment criteria, strategy reviews involve the right stakeholders, top senior management, inputs from low organizational levels, and external stakeholders. An example from the survey: the reviewed and updated strategic plan is an accurate reflection of the current business environment and expected trends. Okay, the last dimension, strategy governance and communication. I have an example here from the evidence-based assessment. The organization has an extensive strategy communication plan, and the assessment criteria, the communication plan should include a breakdown of information type on different audience type. The communication audience should include internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders. It should contain the frequency of communication, and whether there are physical communication channels and online communication channels used. You have some examples here like posters, LCDs, whiteboards, even meetings, and posts on social media, emails, internet. Now, it's very important to have transparency in strategy communication. Okay, and an example from the perception-based assessment, we have a statement here: there is a high level of awareness, transparency, and understanding of the entity strategy, both internally and externally. You can acknowledge why we asked this question and why internal key stakeholders need to assess on a scale from 1 to 5 the extent to which this statement applies for their organization. Okay, you've seen some examples. I've shown you two statements from each dimension, totally 12 statements from our methodology. There are more than 25, as you saw in the description of the assessment process, more than 25 for the evidence-based assessment and more than 25 for the perception-based assessment. So basically, we have more than 50 statements that reflect best practices as part of the strategic planning maturity model framework. Now, as outputs, we deliver a performance audit report. This is the report containing the results of the maturity assessment. And here you have clear findings and recommendations to improve the strategic planning process. Alongside the report, we provide an executive dashboard. This is a visual element usually sent to top management that comprises of the scores achieved on each dimension for each capability. You can see here it's not only strategic planning. As I told you before, we also look into performance measurement, management, we look into the performance culture, and the employee performance management. All together, they make an integrated performance management system. So this is why you have the overall scores here in the top section. And for each section, you have the current maturity level highlighted on the right side. Besides the report and the executive dashboard, we also provide the roadmap for continuous improvement. Now, this is very important because the audit report will contain a lot of recommendations. Now, in the roadmap for continuous improvement, we prioritize the recommendations and we show organizations how to progress from one level to another. Now, in this screenshot that you have here is a sample from a roadmap for improvement. You can see that there is clear guidance on how to get from level 2 to level 3, and then how to get from level 3 to level 4. And it's the same with the roadmap for continuous improvement infographic. Think if you're a strategy manager or the person responsible for the strategic planning process within your organization, that you have this great tool that you can use during performance review meetings, and just ask the responsible persons, how are we with initiative 1.1 or 1.2 and so on. Also, the client organizations that choose to assess the maturity of their strategic planning capability and reach out for our services will receive official recognition. And this is a certificate of recognition with the achieved maturity level. Now, this is a sample that has level 4 achieved, and you can see highlighted there. What's important for you to know is that regardless of the achieved maturity level, client organizations still receive the certificate of recognition. So there are certificates designed for each level: initial, emergent, structured, integrated, and optimized. Now, knowing all that I've told you today regarding the assessment of the strategic planning capability, of the maturity of this capability, I want to ask you, knowing all this and having some relevant examples from our maturity model framework, from our assessment methodology, even some examples of assessment criteria, what do you think the maturity level of your strategic planning capability is? And I'll leave you 1 minute to answer this question. Okay, I think everyone got a chance to answer. Okay, this is very good. So your organization is effective at strategy formulation, execution, review, and communication. This is very good. I see that all of you feel confident that the strategic planning capability has a maturity level 4 within your organization. Thank you very much for answering the poll. Now, what I would advise you to do is to visit our website, gpaunit.org, and take the self-assessment survey. Now, you've seen 12 examples of statements that reflect best practices. If you go to our website, you have self-assessments for the 5 organizational capabilities for which we conduct maturity assessments. Now, only in strategic planning, you have 24 statements. That's double number, twice as many statements that reflect best practices that you will need to rate on a scale from 1 to 5. And in the end, you receive a report indicating the perceived maturity level, even some optimization tips, and access to a free report on the topic. Now, besides this, I've shown you the online platform. There is a free demo account that you can access. All you need to do is to visit our webpage and go to subscriptions, to the subscriptions page. There's a link in the main menu in the top side of the page, and you have a short video here about demo account showing you the features that I spoke about throughout this webinar, like collecting results, deploying the survey, having it all centralized in an Excel sheet, making it easier for you to get to the final score and eventually the maturity level. There's a free demo account to the online platform. If you like what you see, if you like the features, you can go for one of our subscriptions. We have an Explorer subscription. For example, if you only want to assess the strategic planning capability maturity level, or standard subscription if you want to look into all the 5 organizational capabilities and their maturity. Now, to review today's webinar, what I want you to remember after this webinar is that this strategic planning maturity assessment clearly indicates the maturity level of this capability, and it can provide guidance on how to progress, how to get to the next level. The outputs highlight both the strengths and the weaknesses of the strategic planning process and support performance improvement. As I told you in the beginning, one of the main benefits is adding value to the strategic planning process, adding value, added value generated by the strategic planning process. And this is by comparing current practices to best practices. The strategic planning maturity assessment is conducted with the help of the dedicated online platform. You've seen some screenshots from this platform. It really supports the process as it makes it all easier with all the integrated features. So try the self-assessment, try the demo account to get a clear perspective on strategic planning maturity assessments. You have some references here in the slide with the screenshots and research reports and other the maturity model framework that I've talked about. Also, you have a webinars archive that you can access, webinars held by the KPI Institute. As I told you, we don't only look into strategic planning, we look into 5 organizational capabilities. On the 8th of November, I'm going to have another webinar on how to conduct a performance measurement maturity assessment with more examples of best practices and assessment criteria for that capability. And for those of you who are looking to get trained and certified in conducting maturity assessments, we have a certified performance audit professional training program in Singapore that's going to take part from the 20th to the 22nd of November this year. Okay, let's see. I promised you a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. I will ask my colleague to tell me if there are questions, and please take a minute to write your questions in the relevant section.
Well, Aline, there seem to be no questions, so that brings us to the end of our webinar. Do you have any last words for our listeners?
Yes. I'm sorry, Andre, but I see a question here by Mr. Mustafa saying, "How can I get the slides?"
I've
I just
answered
want
that
to.
one.
Oh, you've answered that. Sorry. Yes, last words. Thank you all so much for attending. I hope that you've learned something from today's webinar. Don't forget to check the self-assessment and try the demo account, the online platform. It's really a great tool that we developed to support conducting maturity assessments on the strategic planning capability, and not only. As I've mentioned before, we also conduct maturity assessments on performance measurement, performance management, performance culture, and employee performance management. And if you're looking to get trained and certified for conducting such maturity assessments, don't forget about our training course in Singapore that is scheduled for the end of November. Again, thank you all so much for attending. Thank you, Andre, for presenting, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you once again for your insightful presentation. The KPI Institute appreciates your interest in the webinar How to Conduct a Strategic Planning Maturity Assessment. Follow our websites and our social media channels to find out more details and to subscribe to our next webinar, Productivity Measurement in the Public Sector, which will be held on the 1st of November by Cristina Mihailoae, the Director of Research Department at the KPI Institute. Also, if you are interested in getting a certification granted by the KPI Institute on vital areas within the performance management discipline, you can explore our scheduled courses on marketplace.kpiinstitute.org. Thank you again for your participation and have a nice day.